Hey guys, and welcome to Ozzie Reviews, and welcome to this month's Q&A. Now this series has become quite popular and I'm really enjoying doing it, guys. So if you do want to become a part of it, all you need to do is just simply jump onto Patreon, be a supporter there, which you can do it from as little as $1 a month. That's it. So anyhow, let's jump into this month's questions. Okay, so the first question here is from Mick Massey, and he says, "Hi Ozzie, just wondering if you would consider an air rifle review. Break barrel versus PCP and 177 versus 22. I'm looking to purchase one soon, mainly to control feral birds and possibly rabbits." Well mate, one of my first reviews was a couple of Walther break action air rifles, one in 177 and the other one in 22. So I have already done, a review. It's not something I review a lot, I have to admit. One thing I'd like to just touch on here, and you can discard it completely, this advice, but if you're going to start going after rabbits, I'd be really going for a 22. And you can also use like CCI quiet ammunition, which is just as loud as an air rifle and very low velocity and reduced energy, that you can shoot birds with no problem at all, and you've got no real problem with it going for another few hundred meters down the track. So I'd be looking at a 22 personally, so that you've got the variety of ammunition for all that sort of game that you're trying to take. However, if you do want to stick with an air rifle, by all means. Look, I haven't done a lot. Perhaps it's something I'll do in the near future, but mate, I've got so many requests for stuff to do. I can only do so much stuff. So in the near future, perhaps I'll do a little bit more with air rifles. Now the next question here is from Mark Schofield, and he says, "Hi Ozzie, love your work. Would like to know, have you used thermal or night vision scopes? Do you find them effective? Do you think they're worth the money? I'm looking at buying an ATN-X sight or night sight as a cheap alternative, but question the effectiveness, and I don't want to drop that kind of money unless I'm pretty certain how good they are." So look mate, completely understand what you're talking about there. A lot of the Generation 2 and 2 Plus night vision stuff is on the market these days here in Australia, because unfortunately a lot of the higher end, like Generation 3, is very restricted still. It is starting to trickle in, and look, as time goes on, we'll have access to it. Personally, I like the Gen 3 stuff. The Generation 2 I found a little bit blurry, especially depending on the brand and obviously the quality of the optic you're looking through. It's really hard. It's a hard one because you've really got to be able to look through one, to satisfy yourself if that's what you want and what you want to spend the money on. And obviously most of the shops that are open, they're open through the day, aren't they? So, you'd have to really wait for someone who's open on a Thursday night and be able to take it out into the car park or something like that and actually have a look at it yourself to satisfy your own needs and requirements. As for the thermal stuff, yes, I've used a bit of thermal gear. I had a optic sent to me recently. Now this was all hush hush because the company doesn't want to be named, and their product isn't for general public release at this stage. But this was a $15,000 thermal, and this thing was just amazing. Looking at distances and being able to pick up game and stuff was almost like just looking through a normal scope. It was just absolutely brilliant. But who's got that sort of money just to drop on a optic? Not a lot of people. So you can go for a lot of the cheaper thermal stuff, but once again the problem is how effective is it over those distances. So mate, look, I haven't really reviewed a lot, have I, with that? It's something that I'd like to do a lot more of down the track. But in the interim, for you to actually have a look through something, I'd be just simply going into a couple of stores that sell this gear and do it on like a Thursday night or something where you can actually have a look across the road or something like that, to satisfy yourself before you drop the money on it. So I hope that helps you out. Now the next question I've got here is from Daniel Appleby, and he says, "Hi Ozzie, do you have any tips or tricks for cleaning the section of the barrel where the case sits? I'm not sure I've got the terminology right, but on a centerfire rifle, the patches do little for the enlarged section where the case slots into the particular neck area, and I'm interested to know how you go about cleaning it." So mate, what you're referring to there is the chamber. There are chamber cleaning brushes available. So your normal brushes that you see that are reasonably thin, At the rear of the brush there'll be a very enlarged section of brush, and that's designed to go into that chamber so you can turn it around and clear out all the gunk and the carbon. But what I use for that personally is I use that foam bore cleaner. If you haven't seen that, have a look at my beginner series and where I do a video on cleaning, because I use it there. So as you spray it in, the foam expands and it gathers all that dirt and gunk, and then the foam starts to melt basically, and then it takes a lot of that gunk with it, or it's very, very loose just to wipe off. Then what I do is I just use a couple of different tools from Gunsmither Tools. Now they make a lot of 1022 tools, but I still use them on all my rifles because they're just really good little tools. So they're just brass tools, and they've got a scraper at one end, and then on the other end they've just got some wire brush. So I can get in there and just scrape out any excess part, or I simply just put a cloth over it, get in there and just gently pull any of the stuff out that's remaining there. So that works for me, and that's all I do. And the next question here is from John Economides. Now he says, "G'day Ozzie, I bit the bullet, pun intended, and I purchased the Tikka Tac A1. I'm looking at buying a scope that will give me a nice clear view out to beyond 500 yards or metres. What scope do you recommend that is around the $2,000 mark that will fit the bill? I'm also looking at Milrad as opposed to the MOA reticle, and was wondering if you had experience with it and what your thoughts are. In addition, what magnification should I be looking at as a bare minimum to stretch the rifle's capability out to beyond 1,000 yards or metres? Cheers mate, and thanks heaps in advance." Well look mate, couple of things there. First of all, congratulations on the rifle. I'm sure you're going to love it. For the scope, for that price, look, for around $1,700 you can get the Leupold VX3i in the long range precision series. The one I'd probably go for would be the 8.5 to 25 by 50. That's the 30mm with the side focus. Look, I've looked through and used a lot of VX3Is. They're just a really good scope when you're on a budget, but you don't want cheap rubbish, made in the Philippines or China, So I do actually really like those scopes, and for the price, I think that would be a great one for you to have a look at. Being Leupold, I'm sure that you could go into some of the bigger stores, or they could even get one in from Niagara for you to have a look at. So I definitely have a look at that. It's also in Milrad, so perfect for what you want. Which would I use? A lot of people know I like MOA. I mean, when I got that Carl scope, I got the MOA version, and a lot of people are like, get with the times, go with Mills. I can use both, but I do like MOA, but there is nothing wrong with either or. What it comes down to is actually getting the range time and training yourself to be effective in the field with whichever measurement you're going to be familiar with using, so Mills or MOA. So that's all it comes down to, mate, is training. So get out there and enjoy it. But let me know what you think of that scope. Next question here is from Edward Gayton, and he says, "Hi Ozzie, what's your opinion on the 7.62 by 39? The Ruger American is chambered in it, so I'm thinking it could be a good no worries rifle. What kind of pest will it take down, and what's the max effective range? Cheers, and thank you for your hard work for all shooters down under." Well, thanks mate, I appreciate that. Now, to answer your question, the 7.62 by 39, as some people may not be aware of, is the AK-47 round, or the SKK SKS round. It was very popular pre-96 here because we could get a box of 20 for $2.50. It was just a full metal jacket, non-corrosive, cheap ammunition from China. Now they've come a long way with the cartridge. I mean, Hornady are making, for example, a 123 grain SST factory load. Just brilliant. I mean, with that you will easily take pigs, deer, dogs, out to 200 yards. Why I say 200 yards is because, look, at the end of the day, it basically is like a 308 short. Uses the same diameter of projectiles. However, there's not as much charge behind it as what there is at 308. So it's kind of like a 308 short to me. That's how I've always, remembered the cartridge as. So for me, once you start going at 300-400 yards, that round becomes transonic. Okay, so it goes through that transonic zone. So in other words, it goes from supersonic back to subsonic, and that's where you lose your aerodynamics, with any round. So, you know, for me, I would not be shooting over 200 yards with it. And once again, you need to use the correct ammunition and also the correct shot placement if you're going to take things like deer, you know, or even pigs with it. So, look, overall, in a Ruger American, mate, it'd be a great alternative for a knockabout rifle, like you say. No fuss rifle. I think you'd quite enjoy it. The recoil is very manageable, very similar to the 300 Blackout. You know, not a whole heap more really than around that sort of 22 to 50 feel to it. To me, that's my honest thoughts on it. So anyhow, let me know how you go. Now, the next question I've got here is from Sean McNally, and he says, I've got myself a Tikka T3 A1 tack in 6.5 Creedmoor and put a Schmidt & Bender PM2 on it. Mate, very nice. Congratulations. Now he says here, looking at projectiles, do you reckon Hornady ELD X147s, but at only around 2,600 feet per second, will be good in PRS comps? It'll only be used for steel targets. So look, mate, I get what you're saying out there. You're talking about if you're going out long range, will it have, you know, the velocity there to stay supersonic and not go through that transonic zone and lose its aerodynamics, basically? Yes, I mean, look, you know, that 147 grain ELD projectile has a BC of 0.697, almost 0.7, which is just ridiculously good. Even at 2,600 feet a second, it's still supersonic out there at 1,300 yards. So you're not going to have problems shooting out to 1,000 with that projectile at that muzzle velocity, because that higher BC, you know, carries the aerodynamics through a lot better than a lot of the lighter weight projectiles. So what I would do, I'd just get the projectiles, I'd reload a few, find the good load for it, see how accurate you think it is, and then shoot it out at that range and see for yourself. But I would definitely be going for it, because if you're going to go into competitions, you want the highest BC available so that it maximizes your ability to get the best score for the day. So obviously it takes skill and everything else, but that's the fun of it. So I'd definitely be looking at that. No problem at all in using that out to 1,000 yards, 1,000 meters. The next question I've got here is from Brent Brooking. Now he says, have you seen the new Victrix rifles from Beretta? Yes, I have, mate. Victrix are a small company in Italy, and I believe Beretta bought them out. So now they've taken over their line of rifles. Their rifles are bolt action, you know, sniper slash semi-tactical type setups. Obviously being bolt action, very good for us here in Australia, unless of course you live in a communist state where they really enforce those appearance laws and you know, ban bolt actions that look scary. But look, that's another side note, and we could take up a whole video alone on that. But getting back to it, yes, they look very similar to the Sabatti STR that I reviewed. I've noticed. Have a look around that, around the action there. It looks very, very similar. But the Victrix rifles certainly look the goods. Very, very nice, and calibers right up from like 6.5 Creedmoor right through to 4.8 Shitac. So they've definitely you know, catered for all those different calibers and scenarios. So anyone who's looking at them or interested in looking at them, you spell it Victrix. So do a search and you'll see what I mean. They're very good looking rifles. Next question I've got here is from Edward Gayton. Edward's trying to decide between the Adler and the Pardus lever action shotgun, and he basically wants one for pigs and just a bit of fun plinking, and wants something that's reliable and which is the better action, basically. He does say here that he's looking at a tack model in either one. Okay, so a couple of things there, mate. As soon as someone says Adler, automatically I start getting pain back in my hands, I swear to God. That lever was just terrible on it, like, you know. But there's a lot of people out there who have said after, you know, hundreds of rounds through it or hundreds of shells through it, you know, everything's loosened up just nicely, and they really, really like their shotgun. So look, for me, I preferred the Pardus. I just like the look of it a little bit better. I like the actual lever when it comes down. the trigger guard doesn't come down as well like it did on the Adler. These are only small things that are my own personal preferences. Now, since I did that Pardus review, I was told by a lot of people who bought the Pardus that there's a new extractor that's been installed on every one of them. So the teething problems that I initially had, where there was extraction problems, is pretty much non-existent now. So it's a lot more reliable. So look, at the end of the day, it's up to you. I would strongly suggest going in and putting both of them up to your shoulder and just seeing which shotgun you prefer. Put it up to your shoulder, work that action, just see what you prefer. But for me, mate, the Pardus would be my preference. Now, next question I've got here is from Cam. Now, Cam is new into shooting, so he's got a couple of basic questions about PTAs. So he says here, if I am issued a PTA and I don't buy a firearm in the next 5 to 7 months, will there be a problem? Okay, mate, so first of all, well, it won't be 5 to 7 months because a PTA lasts for 6 months here in Queensland. So once that PTA is expired, that's it. It won't be a problem. If you haven't made a decision in that time, that's it in a nutshell, you haven't. But I can't see why you wouldn't make a decision in 6 months of what firearm you'd want to buy. The next part of your question is, if I have to reapply for a PTA, do I have to wait another 8 to 12 weeks? No. If you've already got a firearm registered to your license, there's no initial waiting period there. For your first firearm, there is. Okay, you've got to wait that minimum of 28 days. So get a firearm. That's all I can say, is buy yourself something that you know you want, and then after that, the PTAs will come through fairly quickly. The online system here in Queensland, I've seen them come back with as little a turnaround as a week, which has been really good. So one thing I will say to you here, because you're probably unaware of it as well, mate, is if you get a PTA, for example, right? So say, for example, and I've had this before, I get a PTA for like a 308, for example, but the 308 that I want, they don't have it in stock, and then there's a problem with the supplier. They're not getting any more stock for about 7 or 8 months, which means that my PTA will be expired then. So what I've done previously is send your PTA back to weapons licensing, attention the authorised officer, and explain the situation and say that I'd like it changed to another calibre. Therefore, I'd like to now have one in 30-06 or 300 Win Mag or 270. So in other words, you just change it. They won't charge you for it. You just send the PTA back and then they'll send a new one out. Okay, so that's a handy tip to know. Okay guys, so that's all the questions for this month. Thank you very much to each of you who have submitted those questions. And as I say, if you'd like to become a part of it, please jump onto Patreon and we'll catch you on the next edition of Q&A.